Welcome back to Brain Boogerz. I'm MJ, and today we're ending the season with a deep dive into a thought I had. I recalled a high school teacher telling me, rules are meant to be broken. My mind raced with questions about the mishmash of this statement, especially for a teenager. And all these years later, the question came up again. And so, I want to talk about rules, especially the rules that are made to be broken. You ready? Let's dig in. But before we start, if you haven't already, please click subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And if you know someone who might find value in this topic, share it with them, because we're all in this together. And a quick heads up, my hope and effort is focused on empowering you with awareness, language, and tools for introspection and growth. As you listen, some of the stories, examples, or topics may bring up strong emotions, discomfort, or memories of past hurt. My intention is to offer education, validation, and hope, not blame or shame. Alright, so let's dive in and talk about these rules that are meant to be broken. Because we inherit rules long before we can evaluate them. Long before we can test them, revise them, or reject them, we absorb them through tone, repetition, reward, punishment, silence, and fear. Developmental psychology suggests that early relationships help shape our expectations about safety, closeness, worth, and belonging. Trauma research suggests that repeated stress can train the body to anticipate danger, even in moments that are objectively safe. And social theory reminds us that what often looks like an individual flaw may actually be a patterned adaptation to family systems, institutions, and culture. So, this episode asks a harder question than what rules were you taught? It asks, which of those rules were actually survival strategies, and which ones are now limiting your freedom? And instead of ending with this topic, I want to begin with the Hawaiian concept of reconciliation and healing called Ho'oponopono. It's focused around 4 things: sorrow, forgiveness, gratitude, and love. By saying, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. I'm not offering that as clinical evidence. Instead, I'm using it as a reflective frame, a ritual language of acknowledgement and repair. Because before we analyze the rules, many of us need a way to approach them without collapsing into shame. We need a way to say, I learned what I learned in order to survive, but survival and freedom are not always the same thing. So, let's examine the rules that are often treated as moral truths, but may be better understood as adaptations to attachment wounds, adverse childhood experiences, chronic uncertainty, and institutional pressure. Rules like, don't be too much, don't need too much, don't question authority, keep the peace at all costs, stay loyal even when loyalty requires self-betrayal, don't trust your body, don't trust your interpretation, and/or don't tell the truth if the truth threatens belonging. Research on attachment gives us one useful framework here. Early caregiving experiences can shape internal working models. Expectations about whether other people are reliable, whether closeness is safe, and whether the self is worthy of care. That doesn't mean childhood determines destiny. It does mean that what feels natural in adulthood may not always be healthy. Sometimes it's simply familiar. Anxious attachment may make inconsistency feel like love. Avoidant attachment may make distance feel like safety. Disorganized attachment may make intimacy and fear arrive in the same breath. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, offer another layer. At the population level, higher exposure to chronic stress, instability, neglect, or abuse is associated with increased risk across mental and physical health outcomes. ACEs are not a complete portrait of a person, and they're not a prophecy. But they do help explain why some people become hypervigilant, perfectionistic, conflict avoidant, emotionally shut down, or deeply attuned to threat. Those patterns are often mislabeled as character defects, when they may be adaptive responses to early environments. This matters because many so-called personal weaknesses are socially patterned. Silence, people-pleasing, over-explaining, hyper-independence, emotional minimization, compulsive competence, and self-erasure don't emerge in a vacuum. They're often rewarded by families, schools, workplaces, religious communities, and broader social systems that prefer predictability over truth. In that sense, some defects are not merely personal, they're trained. This is where frameworks like SCARF become useful. Human beings react strongly to perceived threats involving status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. If a system can threaten your belonging, destabilize your certainty, reduce your autonomy, or punish your status, it can often secure your compliance without ever needing your genuine agreement. And once fear, obligation, and guilt enter the picture, what some people call loyalty may actually be fog. Not love, not conviction, not ethics, just fear, obligation, and guilt. So as we move through this episode, I want to look carefully at the rules that no longer fit reality. The rules that block growth and preserve fear, enforce false limits, and keep people loyal to systems that diminish them. I want to ask how those rules are installed, how they're maintained, who benefits from them, and what it means to break them without losing our humanity. Because breaking a harmful rule is not rebellion for its own sake. It's disciplined discernment. It's the work of asking whether a belief once helped you adapt, but now prevents you from becoming fully alive. So again, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And with that, let's begin. If we're going to talk seriously about rules worth breaking, we need to ask where those rules come from. Most people don't wake up one day and consciously choose beliefs like don't need too much, don't speak too loudly, don't trust yourself, or keep the peace even when it costs you your dignity. Those rules are usually installed early, often before language is fully available, through repeated experiences of reward, punishment, unpredictability, and emotional calibration. Just think about it. You've been conditioned for 2 decades at least to follow these rules. At this point, you're wondering whether or not they need to be broken. Developmental research gives us a useful starting point. Children don't merely learn facts, they learn patterns. They learn what gets them closeness, what gets them corrected, what gets them ignored, and what gets them shamed. Over time, those repeated interactions become expectations, and expectations, repeated often enough, start to feel like truth. Attachment theory helps explain part of this process. A child who experiences reliable care may begin to internalize the idea that needs can be expressed and met without catastrophe. A child who experiences inconsistency may learn that closeness is unstable and must be chased, managed, or earned. A child who experiences emotional distance may learn that vulnerability is risky and self-sufficiency is safer. A child exposed to fear within the caregiving relationship may learn a more disorganized lesson. The person you need may also be the person you fear. Again, these are not destinies. They're patterns of adaptation. But adaptation matters. Because what begins as a strategy for survival can later masquerade as personality, morality, or common sense. This is also where adverse childhood experiences become relevant. ACE research doesn't tell us everything about a person, but it does show that repeated exposure to abuse, neglect, household instability, and chronic stress can shape later health, coping, and relational functioning. The body learns. The nervous system learns. It learns whether to scan, brace, appease, disappear, perform, or detach. And not all children experience the same environment in the same way. Research on temperament and differential susceptibility suggests that some children are more sensitive to context. They may notice more, feel more, and react more strongly to both harm and care. In a supportive environment, that sensitivity can become empathy, insight, and creativity. In a harmful environment, it can become hypervigilance, self-doubt, emotional flooding, or chronic overadaptation. That distinction matters because many people were not too sensitive. They were sensitive in environments that punished sensitivity. They were perceptive in systems that rewarded denial. They were responsive in homes, schools, or communities that called responsiveness weakness. So when we talk about rules like don't cry, don't question, don't make people uncomfortable, don't need reassurance, or don't challenge the family story, we're often talking about social learning under pressure. We're talking about the way children become fluent in the emotional economy of their environment. Some children learn that approval comes through achievement. Some learn that safety comes through invisibility. Some learn that belonging comes through compliance. And even some learn that love is intermittent and therefore must be pursued through performance, caretaking, or self-erasure. This is one reason I use the phrase socially patterned defects carefully. Not as a diagnosis and not to remove responsibility, but to highlight that many traits treated as private failures are reinforced by systems. Silence can be rewarded. Overfunctioning can be praised. Hyperindependence can be romanticized. Emotional suppression can be called maturity. And self-abandonment can be renamed loyalty. By the time a person reaches adulthood, these rules may feel self-evident. They may say, "This is just who I am," or "I'm just not needy," or "I'm just independent," or "I'm just bad at asking for help," or even "I'm just the strong one." But often, what sounds like identity is adaptation with a long history. And this is why breaking harmful rules can feel so destabilizing. You're not only changing a belief, you're interrupting a survival pattern. You're asking the nervous system to tolerate a new possibility, that honesty may be safer than silence, that boundaries may be healthier than appeasement, that being fully human may be more sustainable than being endlessly manageable. So, before we judge ourselves for the rules we learned, we need to understand the conditions that taught them. Because compassion without analysis becomes sentimentality, but analysis without compassion becomes cruelty. We need both. The question is not only what rules did you inherit, the question is, what did those rules help you survive? And what are they costing you now? If harmful rules were only taught once, many of them would not survive. They endure because they're reinforced. They're maintained through emotion, repetition, social reward, institutional pressure, and manipulation. In other words, people don't keep obeying damaging rules simply because the rules make sense. Often, they keep obeying them because the cost of disobedience has been made to feel unbearable. One useful framework here is FOG, fear, obligation, and guilt. Fog helps explain why people remain loyal to dynamics that diminish them. Fear says if I tell the truth, I may lose love, status, safety, or belonging. Obligation says I owe this person, this family, this institution, this role, even if the cost is my own well-being. Guilt says if I choose myself, set a boundary, or refuse the script, I'm selfish, disloyal, ungrateful, or cruel. Fog is powerful because it doesn't always feel like coercion. It often feels like conscience. That's partly what makes it effective. A person may think they're being moral when they're being managed. They may think they're preserving peace when they're preserving dysfunction. They may think they're being loving when they're participating in self-erasure. This is where manipulation tactics matter. Harmful rules are not sustained by ideas alone, they're sustained by methods. Gaslighting destabilizes a person's confidence in their own perception. Triangulation keeps people confused, divided, and easier to control. Shame turns normal human needs into evidence of defect. Moving the goalposts ensures that approval is always conditional and never secure. Intermittent reinforcement, where affection or validation appears unpredictably, can intensify attachment rather than weaken it. The nervous system begins to organize itself around unpredictability, hoping that one more act of compliance will restore connection. Other tactics are more overt. Silent treatment can function as social punishment. Moral blackmail can frame dissent and betrayal. Spiritual manipulation can present obedience to authority as obedience to God, truth, destiny, or healing. Weaponized vulnerability can force one person to become the emotional container for everyone else, while their own limits are treated as cruelty. False urgency can pressure people to comply before they have time to think clearly. And smear campaigns can make the cost of boundary setting reputationally expensive. These tactics are effective in part because they target predictable human sensitivities. This is where SCARF becomes especially useful. Human beings are highly responsive to threats involving status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. If a family, organization, or community can threaten your status, make you uncertain, reduce your autonomy, destabilize your sense of belonging, or distort fairness, it can often secure compliance without ever having to persuade you on the merits. Think about how many harmful rules are protected this way. Don't question authority, or you'll lose status. Don't challenge the system, or you'll lose belonging. Don't set boundaries, or you'll be framed as selfish. Don't ask for evidence, or you'll be treated as disloyal. Don't change, or you'll disrupt certainty for everyone around you. The rule survives not because it's true, but because it's attached to social consequences. This is one reason institutions matter so much in this conversation. Families, schools, religious communities, workplaces, and media systems don't merely transmit information, they shape norms. They decide what is rewarded, what is punished, what is named virtue, and what is named deviance. A school may reward compliance more than curiosity. A workplace may reward overfunctioning more than sustainability. A religious environment may reward submission more than discernment. A family may reward silence more than honesty. A social platform may reward performance more than integrity. And over time, these environments can make harmful rules feel natural. People begin to confuse adaptation with character. They call burnout commitment. They call silence maturity. They call hyper-independence strength. They call self-abandonment service. They call fear respect. They call control protection. And they call appeasement kindness. And once a rule has been moralized, breaking it can feel like becoming a bad person. That's an important point. Many people don't struggle to leave harmful systems because they lack intelligence. They struggle because the system has fused obedience with goodness. To disobey feels not merely risky, but wrong. That's why discernment matters. Not every feeling of guilt is evidence of wrongdoing. Sometimes, guilt is simply what arises when an old rule is being challenged. Not every accusation of selfishness is a moral verdict. Sometimes it's the protest of a system losing access to your compliance. And not every disruption of peace is harm. Sometimes it's what truth sounds like when it enters a room built on denial. So when we ask which rules are worth breaking, we also must ask how those rules have been protected. Who benefits from them? What emotions keep them alive? What tactics enforce them? What institutions normalize them? And what part of us still believes that survival depends on obedience? Because once we can name the mechanism, the rule begins to lose some of its power. It may still feel costly to break, but it no longer feels mysterious. We can start to see that what held us was not always truth. Sometimes it was fear, organized and repeated until it sounded like common sense. Now that we have looked at how harmful rules are installed and maintained, we can name the rules themselves more directly. Not because every person has lived every one of them, and not because they function identically across all cultures and contexts, but because many of them recur with striking consistency. They appear in families, schools, churches, workplaces, relationships, and public life. They're often presented as wisdom, maturity, discipline, or morality. But under closer examination, many function less like truth and more like social control. One category of harmful rules governs the self. Don't be too much. Don't need too much. Don't feel too deeply. Don't change your mind. Don't trust your body. Don't take up space. Don't fail in public. And don't begin until you are fully ready. Psychologically, these rules often reflect shame-based conditioning. They teach a person to monitor their own existence as if visibility were danger. They can produce chronic self-editing, emotional suppression, perfectionism, and a split between public competence and private exhaustion. Research on shame, self-criticism, and trauma-related adaptation helps explain why these rules can feel protective even while they narrow a person's life. Another category governs intimacy and belonging. Keep the peace at all costs. Love means enduring anything. If you explain yourself clearly enough, they will change. Boundaries are selfish. Forgiveness requires reconnection. History matters more than harm. Loyalty means silence. These rules often flourish in environments where conflict is unsafe, accountability is weak, or attachment is insecure. They can train people to confuse love with tolerance for harm, and closeness with the absence of boundaries. Family systems theory, attachment research, and work on coercive control all help explain why some people become highly skilled at preserving connection while losing contact with themselves. A third category governs labor, productivity, and value. Busy means productive. Rest must be earned. Your worth is your output. If it's easy, it doesn't count. Burnout proves commitment. You must do everything yourself. If you are not monetizing it, it doesn't matter. These rules are reinforced not only by personal history, but by economic and institutional systems that reward overfunctioning. They can produce chronic depletion, difficulty resting, and a moralization of exhaustion. Research on burnout, perfectionism, and role strain suggests that when productivity becomes identity, rest begins to feel like guilt rather than recovery. Then there are rules about speech, interpretation, and dissent. Don't question authority. Don't ask too many questions. Don't make people uncomfortable. Don't speak unless you're an expert. Don't name harm unless it's extreme. Don't challenge the family story. And don't critique the institution that fed you. These rules are especially powerful because they regulate meaning. They don't merely tell people what to do, they tell people what they're allowed to notice, name, and trust. When a person is repeatedly taught to distrust their own perception, gaslighting becomes easier and institutional loyalty becomes harder to challenge. Research on conformity, power, and norm enforcement helps explain why truth-telling often carries social cost, even when it's ethically necessary. There are also rules about who a person is allowed to become. Stay in your lane. People like you don't do things like that. Pick one version of yourself. Your past decides your ceiling. Reinvention is betrayal. Aging means shrinking. Healing means becoming quieter, easier, and less disruptive. These rules function by narrowing possibility. They make growth look like disloyalty, and complexity look like inconsistency. They're often enforced through ridicule, exclusion, or accusations of arrogance. Social identity research and work on stigma help explain why people may overperform, self-silence, or remain attached to limiting roles long after those roles stop serving them. Finally, some rules are not merely personal or relational. They're institutional. Schools may reward compliance over curiosity. Religious spaces may reward submission over discernment. Workplaces may reward overextension over sustainability. Gendered systems may reward self-erasure in some people and emotional restriction in others. Racialized systems may regulate who is seen as credible, safe, threatening, competent, or fully human. In these settings, harmful rules are often framed as common sense, but common sense is not always neutral. Sometimes it's simply ideology repeated until it feels natural. This is why institutional analysis matters. Without it, people may blame themselves for patterns that are being socially reproduced at scale. Naming these rules is not an exercise in rebellion for its own sake. It's a way of restoring discernment. Once a rule is named, it can be examined. Once it's examined, it can be tested. Once it's tested, a person can ask whether it protects life, dignity, truth, and relational health, or whether it protects fear, hierarchy, and control. And that's the deeper question beneath all of this. Not simply, what rules were you taught? But which of those rules still deserve your loyalty? Once harmful rules have been named, the next question is not simply whether they're false. The deeper question is what it means to break them. Because in practice, breaking a harmful rule is rarely dramatic in the way people imagine. It's often quiet, repetitive, and psychologically expensive. It may look less like rebellion and more like tolerating the discomfort of becoming honest. This matters because many people assume that once they recognize a rule as harmful, they should be able to release it easily. But recognition and reorganization are not the same thing. A person can understand intellectually that a rule is damaging and still feel intense guilt, fear, grief, or disorientation when trying to live differently. That doesn't necessarily mean the rule was true. It often means the rule was deeply wired into survival. From a psychological perspective, breaking a harmful rule often involves prediction error. The mind and body expect one outcome, and reality slowly teaches another. A person who learned that boundaries led to abandonment may set a boundary and then experience panic, even if no abandonment occurs. A person who learned that rest is laziness may stop working and feel shame before they feel relief. A person who learned that truth-telling is dangerous may speak clearly and then brace for punishment, even in a safer environment. In that sense, breaking a rule is not only cognitive, it's relational, emotional, and psychological. It asks the nervous system to update. It asks the self to risk a different experience of reality. It asks a person to tolerate the temporary instability that comes when an old adaptation is no longer running the whole system. This is one reason discernment matters more than rebellion. Rebellion alone can still be reactive. It can remain organized around the old rule, just in reverse. Discernment asks a more mature question. What supports life, dignity, truth, reciprocity, and health? A harmful rule is not replaced merely by doing the opposite. It's replaced by developing a more accurate principle. For example, the rule, "Don't need too much," is not healed by becoming endlessly demanding. It's healed by learning that needs can be named, negotiated, and held with dignity. The rule, "Keep the peace at all costs," is not healed by constant confrontation. It's healed by learning the difference between peace and suppression. The rule, "Your worth is your output," is not healed by abandoning responsibility. It's healed by recognizing that responsibility and humanity are not enemies. This is also where grief enters. Breaking a harmful rule often means grieving the version of life you hoped the rule would secure. If I'm good enough, maybe they will love me consistently. If I stay quiet, maybe I will finally belong. If I overperform, maybe I will become undeniable. If I never need anything, maybe no one will be able to shame me for needing. Letting go of the rule may also mean letting go of the fantasy that obedience would eventually make the system safer. That grief can be profound. It's not only grief for what happened, it's grief for what didn't happen. The care that was inconsistent, the safety that was conditional, the belonging that required self-editing, the institutions that asked for loyalty without offering reciprocity, the relationships that depended on your compliance more than your wholeness. That grief can be profound. It's not only grief for what happened, it's grief for what didn't happen, the care that was inconsistent, the safety that was conditional, the belonging that required self-editing, the institutions that asked for loyalty without offering reciprocity, the relationships that depended on your compliance more than your wholeness. And yet, this is also where agency returns. Once a person can see that a rule was adaptive rather than sacred, they can begin to choose differently. They can ask, what principle do I want to live by now? Not, what kept me acceptable? Not, what kept me manageable? Not, what kept me from being punished? What aligns with reality, integrity, and health? That question opens the door to replacement principles. Instead of "don't be too much," the new principle may be, "I can be fully present without apologizing for existing." Instead of "boundaries are selfish," it may become, "boundaries are one way adults make relationship possible." Instead of "rest must be earned," it may become, "restoration is part of responsible living." Instead of "loyalty means silence," it may become, "honesty is part of love." And instead of "don't question authority," it may become, "authority that cannot tolerate examination is not trustworthy." Breaking harmful rules also requires patience. Some rules are not broken once, they're broken repeatedly, in layers across situations. A person may learn to set boundaries at work and still struggle in family relationships. They may trust themselves intellectually and still collapse under shame in moments of conflict. Change is often uneven. That doesn't make it unreal, it makes it human. So when we talk about breaking the rules, we're not talking about becoming reckless, cruel, or oppositional for its own sake. We're talking about the disciplined work of revising inherited beliefs in light of evidence, experience, and ethical clarity. We're talking about becoming less governable by fear, less persuadable by guilt, less available for manipulation, and more capable of truth. And maybe that's one of the clearest signs that a rule needed to be broken, when breaking it doesn't make you less human, but more fully alive. As we close, I want to return to the question underneath this entire episode. Not simply what rules were you taught, and not even only which rules were harmful. The deeper question is this: which rules still deserve your loyalty? That question matters because not every rule is oppressive, and not every structure is a prison. Some rules protect life, some boundaries preserve dignity, some disciplines make freedom more sustainable. The point of this episode hasn't been to romanticize rebellion or to suggest that all inherited wisdom is suspect. The point has been to ask whether the rules we obey are serving truth, health, reciprocity, and human flourishing, or whether they're preserving fear, hierarchy, and self-betrayal. Research can help us name the mechanisms. Attachment theory can help explain why some forms of instability feel familiar. Trauma research can help explain why the body may interpret change as danger. Work on temperament and sensitivity can help explain why some people absorb environments more intensely than others. Frameworks like SCARF can help explain why threats to status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness are so powerful. Fog can help explain why fear, obligation, and guilt keep people loyal to dynamics that diminish them. Institutional analysis can help explain why private pain is so often socially organized. But analysis, however necessary, is not the final step. At some point, understanding must become discernment. Discernment asks, now that I can see the rule more clearly, what will I do with it? Will I continue to call it wisdom because it's familiar? Will I continue to call it morality because it was rewarded? Will I continue to call it love because I learned to survive inside it? Or will I examine whether it produces honesty, dignity, accountability, and life? That's why I wanted to begin and end with Ho'oponopono. I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. Not as a substitute for evidence, not as a shortcut around complexity, but as a language of repair, a way of approaching the self without contempt, a way of acknowledging that many of us learned harmful rules in good faith, under pressure, in dependency, in fear, or in longing. A way of saying, I don't have to hate myself for what I had to learn to survive. Maybe I'm sorry is for the ways we were taught to mistrust ourselves. Maybe please forgive me is for the times we enforced those same rules against our own bodies, voices, needs, and limits. Maybe thank you is for the parts of us that adapted, even imperfectly, and kept us here. Maybe I love you is the beginning of refusing to confuse survival with freedom. Because that may be the deepest work of all. Not just identifying harmful rules, but refusing to keep building a life around them. Refusing to keep calling fear wisdom. Refusing to keep calling silence maturity. Refusing to keep calling self-erasure love. Refusing to keep calling exhaustion virtue. Refusing to keep calling compliance peace. If a rule requires you to abandon reality, distrust your own perception, betray your body, suppress your grief, mute your voice, or remain loyal to harm, then at the very least, that rule deserves examination. And if it cannot survive examination, it doesn't deserve obedience. So maybe the work is not to become ruleless. Maybe the work is to become more honest about which rules protect life and which ones merely protect systems that benefit from your diminishment. And maybe healing in the end is not becoming easier to manage. Maybe healing is becoming harder to manipulate, harder to shame into silence, harder to organize around fear, and more able to live. So, I will leave you with the question one more time. Which rules protected you once, and which ones are now preventing you from becoming fully alive? Sit with that, write with that, pray and meditate with that, argue with that if you need to, but don't rush past it. Because some rules were never sacred, they were just repeated, and repetition is not the same thing as truth. Thank you for joining me through the first season of Brain Boogerz. I hope the discussions have given you ample topics to explore and question in many facets of your life. You joined me through some fun as well as infuriating topics, And I hope you've discovered more about yourself, what brought you to this point, and what tools you can acquire as you move into the untouched or avoided aspects of yourself. If this episode has helped you, share it with others who may find meaning in this introspective journey. Keep learning, keep wondering, and join me next time where we'll pick at the nagging thoughts, discover ourselves, engage in introspection, and experience growth on Brain Boogerz.